Transforming the Bay with Christ is a new movement with an incredible goal. To tell us more about it is Director of TBC, John Talbert, so stay with us.
Churches really in the Bay Area are more about survival. It's hard, I understand that from the plight of the pastor. Recognizing that if we work in conjunction together, we can actually do way more. And so building relationships without an agenda, but just relationships to befriend one another, recognize we're on the same team, changes things.
Welcome back. Many of us have dreamed of a Bay Area-wide movement to restore unity among churches and relevance to the community. John Talbert, Serve Director for Transforming the Bay with Christ, which is TBC, has served in ministry within the Bay Area since 1996 and has a heart for connecting ministries for the cause of Christ. He is a pastor, connector, creative commentator, and a chaplain to professional NFL and MLS teams, to name a few of his passions. Today, he gives us a first-hand glimpse into this new movement called TBC. I want to hear all about it, have heard about it, and I am so thrilled that you specifically are here to tell our viewers about this new movement.
It's great to be here.
96? Since
Yeah.
what all have you been doing?
Well, I came to the Bay Area from Southern California, and I was a college pastor at a church in Almaden, and I served there for 8 years, and it was interesting. The pastor there was very into pastoral unity and building relationships with other churches and going to meetings that I would never have gone to. And I even asked him, why do you go to these meetings? He says, because unity matters. And it wasn't until later, when I left that church in 2004, that I find that to be true and really tapped into those early days of ministry.
Why do you feel unity matters?
Well, I think churches operate very much within their own brand, their own niche, their own community, and what happens is they begin to turn inward and lose some of the focus for their community, as well as recognizing that churches that are in that same area have that same goal, that same objective. Not to build their population or numbers or bottom line or anything else, but to actually reach people, disciple people, and see real transformation happen in their area. And somehow, somewhere along the line, that message got lost, and churches really in the Bay Area are more about survival. And it's hard. I understand that from the plight of the pastor, but recognizing that if we work in conjunction together, we can actually do way more. And so building relationships without an agenda, but just relationships to befriend one another, recognize we're on the same team, changes things.
Well, you brought up another point. I mean, you were in SoCal and now you're up here.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between the two.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Southern California is a completely different animal. And I left church with a celebrity pastor, and they've got enormous churches in Southern California. Here in the Bay Area, we're struggling, and we've got a really low percentage of folks that are actually churched. But the more I've traveled in the Bay, I'm from the South Bay, it's the San Jose area, but the more that I've traveled the Bay, up in Oakland, East Bay, up in the peninsula of San Francisco, and up in San Rafael, I'm recognizing that God is doing a significant work in the hearts and lives of people that is an undercurrent, and it's a story not being told. There's a perception of the Bay that people think there's this hovering dark cloud over the Bay, and that's not true. There's great men and women on the front lines doing phenomenal work that are transforming their region. And so we're just trying to foster,
Support it.
Yeah, support it, not mess it up.
Yeah.
Really try to help build relationships that are meaningful, not just, we don't have a purpose per se. Let's just get to know one another and share the same goal, same heart
And see where it goes.
Yeah, just to be friends. Yeah. Pastors need more friends.
Yeah.
You know, we speak to a lot of people, but it doesn't mean that we have that many people that we're connected to. And so when you meet somebody in the same industry, the same heartbeat.
Connect on
You find a
different
connect
level.
on a different level, yeah. And your spouse connects, and kids connect. And I grew up a pastor's kid, and we always joke around like, "Oh, you're a pastor's kid. I'm a pastor's kid. I haven't seen you in therapy ever." You know what I mean? That.
So there are a few.
Oh yes. So we recognize that we're, but recognizing that kids, or families in ministry actually need one another.
Yeah.
More than just our mission.
Yeah.
But for our lives, for our vitality, to thrive as just a person in the community doing my job that just happens to be handed to me by God to say, we need you to do this. I need other pastors too. So pastoral unity is a big deal.
So you brought that with you to Westgate when you came to Northern California? That kind of feeling that
I came, well, when I came to South Hills, the church in Almaden, I was taught that by a pastor who was very strong in unity named Peter Wilkes.
Okay.
And Peter is very well known in the Bay Area. He's since retired, and he taught me a lot of things that said we need one another. And from that, when I came to Westgate, I recognized in 2004 to 2010, or 2014, I'm sorry, the last 10 years, I recognized we don't, it's not just a nice thing to build unity. The lack of unity has got us the statistics that we have. And the fact that we're not working together is an indictment to us to say, we can do things differently. And it's as easy as building friends. My kids can do it when they go to a new school. Why can't I? With pastors and leaders in the area. So it's about reaching out and doing that.
All right, and I know you're involved with a Beautiful Day, which is kind of, your passion is to connect.
Sure.
I can hear that from your early days.
Yeah.
But, well, let's go to a different direction for a minute before we go to TBC.
Yeah.
I call it a creative commentator.
Yeah.
So, among other things, you do comedy as well.
I do. I've been doing comedy for 10 years. It was a dare from my wife. She said, you should try this, and I'm like, so I went for it and entered a comedy competition in the South Bay and placed 4th. And I thought, all right, maybe I should try this. And I started doing comedy competitions and different shows, and started performing as a feature comic in secular clubs.
Yes.
And they would introduce me as pastor by day, comic by night. And
Emmy Awards and all that?
I did the Emmy Awards. I've performed on some of the largest stages, and it's been fantastic. And
your heart still goes to unity among churches, so we'll come back. You might have to do something funny before you leave, but more with John Talbot when we return. We're back with John Talbot of Transforming the Bay Area with Christ. You also are a chaplain for some pretty major sports teams, or you have been. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. I was asked to become the chaplain for the San Jose Earthquakes. So I did that for about 4 years, and then I work with the NFL, and so visiting teams that come in and play the 49ers or the Raiders. I'm doing both those teams, even though I am a Raider fan.
I was going to ask, how do you manage that?
Well, I'm a Jesus fan first, and then I'm a Raider fan second. So, and I do tell the teams that Jesus, if he were walking on the earth today, he would be a Raider fan for sure, because the Bible says that he came to seek and save those who are lost. And he did hang out with sinners and tax collectors, and if you've seen the black hole, that's what I'm talking about.
We're not talking about this season. Okay, but comedy, all these big clubs, also universities and colleges, and the NFL, MLS, whatever is coming up, whatever you're doing.
Well, I'm always, when I go to Oakland, I'm looking for a winning season for the Raiders.
The similarity is what?
I was looking for a win.
I think I should have clarified for TBC.
Yes, TBC. Okay.
But I do understand, and I'm not certain you're going to get that anytime soon.
Yeah, no, what's interesting for me is that because I'm a Raiders fan, going into Oakland and meeting pastors and leaders, that I can speak into these venues and humor for us. And they're like, well, he is a Raiders fan, and so I started and so I started meeting with pastors and leaders and just saying, you know what, we share a common pain. It's really hard to be a fan, but we're committed. And then we just started talking about themselves, what are the great things that it's funny, and then they jump right into a point that makes you go, oh yeah, I totally get what he's saying. It makes it easier to receive.
And I know that you have
in
some
comedy,
ideas
I just find myself
for
partly
churches to kind of
I have a
with the community
weird thought process. I view the world in a very different way, and what I've learned.
Okay, so and there are ways for you to become involved. So we'll find out how when we return.
I have a rule called first thought wrong, which means if I'm thinking it, don't say it. Don't say it out loud.
That's hard for some people to learn, though, John.
I will say that has saved me more times than my wife will look at me as she sees what I see, and she's just like, first thought wrong. Don't say that. So, but comedy, communicating with sports teams, inspiring people to live intentionally different. And it's woven into the fabric of Beautiful Day, of serving the community, of reaching in and blessing people with who you are as a person. With that heart that you have and passion, tell us about TBC and why you decided to become involved. Yeah. It's funny, I didn't decide, they decided for me. I kind of did hear that. Yeah, so I'd been doing Beautiful Day. I started Beautiful Day in 2004 in the South Bay, and it just grew really, really wide across the Bay. A lot of people serving their community in a very innovative way. I was invited to the first meetings, the very, very first meetings with TBC, with prominent pastors and leaders and businessmen, men of means, to sit down and say, hey, what if? What if we were to galvanize and begin to talk about unity? And what if we were to begin to plant more churches and video sites? And what if we were to create a movement of people serving one another in their community in the entire Bay? Now there's 9 counties that touch the Bay, and 2 counties south of that, Santa Cruz and Monterey. It represents close to 11 million people. And so they came to me. I was their first. They approached me back in December and said, would you consider coming on staff? And they approached my lead pastor, and he called me, and I said, what? Wow. And I was honored, humbled, and terrified at the same time, because it's so big. And yet, I think some of the skill sets that God has equipped me with and given me lend towards unity, building relationships, fostering church planting efforts, and then taking some of the stuff we've learned over the last 10 years and creating service opportunities for people in and around the Bay. And you have, I think what I heard when I attended the last meeting was there are 3 main focuses. Yeah, so we call them, just to make them really easy. And sticky. 3, yes. Yes, amplify, unify, and multiply. Amplify is really going around the Bay Area, identifying the great work that's already happening, and tell the story louder. Let people know, here's what's going on. My very first meeting, I said, what's happening in Oakland? Because I'm sure there's great men and women on the street level doing phenomenal work in Oakland. Let's go tell their story. And I kept using the word amplify, and I thought, man, that's a sticky word for me. And then we just tied in the others. Unify is building pastoral relationship, meaningful, prayerful relationships where pastors and faith leaders are getting to know one another, and multiply is multiplying churches around the Bay. When you say Oakland, what were you specifically looking, just for instance, what were you specifically looking for in Oakland? Well, I'm always, when I go to Oakland, I'm looking for a winning season for the Raiders. I was looking for a win. I should have clarified. Yeah, no, I'm for teasing. TBC. Yes, oh, TBC, okay. But I do understand, and I'm not certain you're going to get that anytime soon. Yeah, no, what's interesting for me is that because I'm a Raiders fan, going into Oakland and meeting with pastors and leaders, that became a common point for us. And they were like, well, he is a Raiders fan, and I started. So it must be okay. Yeah, and so I started meeting with pastors and leaders and just saying, you know what, we share a common pain. It's really hard to be a fan, but we're committed. We're committed, and then we just started talking about what are the great things that they're doing in the area that's transforming that region, and it's significant work.
And I know that you have some ideas for churches to kind of interconnect with the community in specific ways too, all for the greater good. So maybe we can cover some of that when we get back.
That'd be great.
Okay, so, and there are ways for you to become involved. So we'll find out how when we return. Welcome back. All right, I know there are people watching that are going to want to know how they can get involved with this ministry. So how can we?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we're challenging pastors and leaders to do is to meet the pastor that's nearby. What's the name of the pastor of the church nearby? And for people within the church to begin to pray and to find out what's happening at that church next door. Because we are on the same team, and we are working towards, we may have some like minor doctrinal differences, but we have to set those minor things aside and begin to ask, what is the critical mission of the church? So that's one thing. The other thing is if your pastor's not connected or engaged, to say, hey, listen, this would be a great thing for you to connect to. Our website will be up soon, and they could look us up online. You type in TBC or type in Transform the Bay with Christ, and you'll find, you can Google that, you'll find that, or Google my name, you'll find that as well. But I would also say we're starting an initiative where we're looking at every public elementary, middle, and high school in the entire Bay, and to map that and identify what are the schools that are out there, and then what are the faith communities' touch points. Some have as much as Young Life, some have kids clubs, some have school impact. There's all kinds of things, and some schools don't have those things. And so to help us by saying, hey, this is our church, our faith community is connected in this way. And as we begin to move forward with initiatives that has touch points at every elementary school, to jump in on those things.
Because there is a viewpoint that church cannot interact with school or education, but they can. There are some similar things that they can interact on. It doesn't necessarily have to be a scripture. Or
I think what's helpful for churches and for us is those of faith. We have to tone down our rhetoric a little bit. That doesn't mean we tone down our theology. I still embrace a strong theology that embraces who Christ is and what He's done for me in my life. But oftentimes there's a tipping point where if I talk too much, I've tipped over that side, and if I talk less, they'll ask more. And so I've always told people to shut up and show up. You know what I mean? Just to be present and ask the school. Don't tell them what they need. Ask them, how can I serve? And that can be a group of faith community leaders and churches. That could be one church, that could be a small group, that could be a family, that could be an individual that goes to a school and says, you know what, I have 2 hours a week to block out. What do you need? And most schools are so under-resourced. Yes,
that's a very good point.
That there's a phenomenal opportunity for you to jump in and to live out your faith by serving as Christ did, in a way that's super tangible. And I tell people all the time, I promise you, if you live more like Jesus, they'll ask you. And when they ask you, you got freedom to say whatever you want. But when you start with the answer, they were like, I wasn't even asking a question. You know what I mean? So it's changing that rhetoric a little bit to where we are a little more living more like Christ and allowing people to organically ask what they would ask.
Like, wow, look what you're doing as a Christian, rather than, oh my. Your service has definitely been around your desire for others to find Christ, based upon your own testimony from everything that I have gathered. How do you feel when you think about the Bay Area being approximately 95% unchurched? Now, I realize that doesn't mean that there's only 5% Christians, but it does speak to perhaps, you know, a lower amount of Christians in the Bay Area than maybe other areas. How do you feel about that? What does that do?
I feel optimistic, actually. Just having traveled the Bay and meeting great people and knowing that we are in a culture shift within the popular culture as well as within the church. We have to do church better. We have to begin to ask the questions that millennials are asking, those that are 18 to 28, and what draws them to faith. And so I'm 51, and my the church wasn't handed to me very well when I was 18 to 24. It wasn't handed to me, and it was a wrestling match to where it's just like, why would I even go to this? It's just easier to go do something myself and start my own thing. Well, we don't want to do that to the next generation. Yeah. And we want to be able to empower them, and not to say, hey, start your own youth service. No, this is your church. These are your people, and this is where you serve, and to empower them in their gift mix and to train them, and then to move away and hand that church off to them in a way that's successful. I think that's a key element for us as a faith community, is how do we hand the church off to the next generation effectively? And then how do we live in a way that's consistent with our lifestyle? We have to respond to the city's greatest needs rather than assume that's a need, or and this happens often, and this is maddening a little bit, where the church will see a problem, an issue, and then we start our own church and Christian response to it, rather than looking at who else within the community is responding to that, and how do we partner with them. And so to partner and come alongside and to collaborate with organizations, those sacred and those secular.
John, why do you think they need Christ?
Well, everybody needs Christ. I think our Bay Area is hungry for something deeply spiritual and meaningful. And for them to connect with the person and work of Christ, it's not just our greatest mission, I think it's their greatest opportunity and thing that they'll ever make. And it's our job as the faith leaders is to do the best accurate representation of who Christ is. And so that resonates in my heart. So
put aside our differences and come on, let's get this job done.
Let's get it done.
For more information about TBC, contact us through ktln.tv and we will get you in touch with the TBC team. Consider how you can get involved by supporting this effort. Together through Christ, we can make a difference. KTLN is a donor-supported ministry. Programs like this one are made possible through your generous contributions. Join us again next week.